In this segment, we're going to highlight a story about a lady named Marlene Kleppies. Now, the first 2 years of Marlene Kleppies' life would set the pace for the next several years. She was orphaned before the age of 2 and was raised by her great-grandparents.
Marlene was born with cerebral palsy, which greatly affected her vision, speech, and other motor skills. Now, just imagine having a childhood where you could not run and play with other children. It was not until the age of 5 that Marlene was finally able to walk, simply with the help of a walker and with assistance. So she wasn't actually able to run and walk like a normal child would have at that age.
She had to use braces and a walker.
Yeah.
And in December of 1980, Marlene had seizures that lasted for 2 days. And during these severe seizures, she would sustain injuries to her head, resulting in brain damage. And by the age of 18, Marlene was a quadriplegic and spending most of her time in a fetal position and barely able to communicate.
Now, in March of 1981, she was taken to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where doctors assessed the damage of her latest brain injury. Amazingly enough, Marlene had an encounter with God while she was there. God had given a very specific vision to Marlene, and that it was that he was going to heal her on March the 29th, 1981, which was just like totally amazing because this was just 3 weeks away from her vision and the given date.
Right, and so Marlene, in her words of the vision, she said, "He showed me the inside of a church. The church had light-colored woodwork, and the doorknob was a triangular glass-colored doorknob. And then the vision showed her a rust-colored stretcher, and people gathered around her praying for her. And this was a man in a pinstripe suit that God had showed her who was praying over her. Now, she could picture herself riding a bike on beautiful green grass, and it said there, March 29th, in great big bold letters. And that was just 3 weeks away.
Now, to Marlene's disappointment, the 3 weeks had passed and nothing happened. Marlene, though, had mistakenly thought that she would be healed in Missouri. But on March the 28th, the day before the date given in her vision, she found herself still in Rochester, still degenerating, and not connected to any church or familiar with any church people in that particular area.
That's right. So she prayed to God about the vision and pleaded with God for understanding. Now, God answered Marlene's prayers by telling her, of all things, to have the nurse look in the yellow pages under churches.
Right.
So Marlene, the next morning, found a church called Open Bible Church and spoke to Pastor Scott Emerson.
Now, Pastor Emerson could barely understand what Marlene was saying on the phone due to the effects of the crippling disease on her speech. She told him of the miracles she was to receive, and like many of us, I think he was rather skeptical. Marlene then proceeded to describe Emerson's church in great detail and explained that she had seen his church in her vision. Knowing that she had never been to his church, she was rather dumbfounded at the time.
I would be too. And regardless of his skepticism and confusion, he felt compelled to go see this faithful and determined woman at the nursing home. So when he arrived, Marlene was delighted to see that he was wearing a pinstripe suit, just as she saw in her vision. And after listening to her story and vision, Pastor Scott took Marlene to his church.
Now, as it was, every time Marlene was transported, she was strapped into her wheelchair because she jerked so violently that she could fall out of her wheelchair at any time.
Wow.
Now, once they arrived at this church, a group gathered around Marlene, and Pastor Scott asked God to actually heal her from the top of her head to the tip of her toes. Then the group asked her if she wanted to stand on faith, and without hesitation, Marlene replied with an emphatic yes.
And after being helped to her feet, Marlene began to dog trot around the church while praising the Lord. Now, Marlene's eyes got really warm, and God told her to take off her glasses. So she had perfect vision now. He had healed her eyes, and it was a true miracle.
Amazing.
So after being born with cerebral palsy and suffering for 19 years, Marlene was healed of her disease. Now, Marlene was discharged from the rehabilitation unit and now lives a wonderful and active life. To God be the glory, right?
That's right. Now, Marlene's story is proof of how big our God is. Marlene had the faith that could move mountains and wasn't going to give up no matter what obstacles she faced. Now, how often is it that we limit the work of God in our lives to what we think is possible and what is normal? But our God is asking us to believe in great things and things that go way beyond what is normal for a fallen creation.
Thank you for joining Les and Tracy King for A Word on the Word. Visit awordontheword.tv to receive their latest audio or video broadcast. A Word on the Word is sponsored by First Century Ministry